Alright guys, so things are just going bonkers. The big obsession to contain China is getting from bad to worse. First, it was the Dutch company ASML. They are about to comply with the US in banning chip technology to Beijing. But even the Dutch knows the US is full of it. The semiconductor war is all about China's economic dominance and the threat of losing their supply chains. Making the case for national security is getting harder and harder. The recent moves are economically motivated. Listen to this. The big advantage the US has is in their technology gap with China. And thanks to this gap, the margins are huge. However, once China bridges the gap, the chip war will be centered around manufacturing efficiency. In other words, who can make semiconductors the cheapest and the fastest? And it's a battleground that Western companies simply can't win. This chart shows us how fast China can ramp up production. In legacy chips, Chinese capacity will reach 50 million wafers by 2030, doubling their current output. And that's more than Japan, the US, and Europe combined. When you control the majority of global supply, you can fight the price war by flooding the world with chips. This will cause higher cost producers in the world to suffer. Their margins will be squeezed, and you can actually push them to the brink of collapse. America's strategy is rather simple here. They want to ensure there will always be a 5 to 10-year gap between US technology and China to keep companies like Nvidia on top to prevent Huawei from bridging the gap. But as American scientist Steve Su points out, this won't succeed. The sanctions will actually backfire.
And if you remember when they started these chip sanctions, there were all these I want to call I would say mid-wit policy analysts in the US who said, this is it. This is the end. China's going to be 10 years behind in semiconductors forever now, right? That's literally what they said. But that isn't what happened. And you and I know how difficult it is for a startup. Even if you have better product, better technology than the incumbent, it's so hard to break into the market and get that market share. But the
Right.
US solved that by threatening to cut off all the dominant products from the top of the food chain companies like SMIC and Huawei, et cetera. So basically they had no choice but to embrace all of the startups in China that were building replacements for all of these other mature products. And that's basically what's been happening last few years.
But the US is still going to try, and they are now arm twisting Japan. Tokyo Electron is about to bow to US pressure and curb exports to Beijing. Now, this is crazy. This is dangerous. Considering China's threat of retaliation, Japan is still on the verge of complying with US punishments. Now, any sane person can see the risk. 47% of Tokyo Electron's revenue comes from China. In fact, the company upped their forecast because China has been stockpiling well ahead of US sanctions. But all this can unravel if Japan goes ahead. It won't just stop with just advanced machines. If things get nasty enough, the US could get ASML and Tokyo Electron to sever ties with Chinese companies completely, which really begs the big question. Why is Japan even considering this? Well, maybe, just maybe, it has something to do with the US steel deal they are so desperate to close. The acquisition that Japan's Nippon Steel wants has been postponed. The decision will be made well after the US election. Now, this has many implications. It could be a bargaining chip America has to pressure Japan. We can't rule this away, we can't take this off the table, it's a big factor. However, does this even make sense? Is the trade off even worth it? Because you could be sacrificing your semiconductor industry plus your automakers in the process. A few weeks ago, China threatened severe retaliation. If you cut away chip making exports to us, we'll hammer your auto industry. We'll restrict the critical minerals you need. And this is where Beijing has the upper hand. In 2023, EV sales accounted for over 20% of China's auto sales. So 1 in 5 vehicles sold was fully electric. Japan, however, is lagging severely behind. Only 5% of vehicles sold were EVs. Considering the market for EVs is growing, companies like Toyota and Honda, they are leaving a ton of money on the table. To make the EV pivot, Japan needs to make more affordable electric cars. And to make EVs that people buy, You need cheap inputs to make your batteries. And guess who controls the supply chain here? It's China. The entire supply chain from nickel to lithium is dominated by Chinese production. So if Beijing cuts these minerals to Japan, making affordable batteries will be next to impossible. China accounts for over 60% of EV battery manufacturing. Companies like BYD and CATL dominates the landscape. Japan has only 6% of the market through Panasonic. However, with scale comes power. Chinese supply chains are so integrated that companies in the mainland they can squeeze the competition out. They can easily grab market share. Earlier this year, CATL announced that battery costs would be slashed in half. Imagine your Panasonic, your customers will flock to the more affordable alternative. Even the 25% tariff from the US isn't enough. US brands like Ford and Tesla, they'll still buy them. And does this really hurt CATL's bottom line? Well, not really. Despite battery costs going down, average earnings are rising. In Q2 this year, the company enjoyed 13% more profit, hitting $1.7 billion. And that's how integrated Chinese supply chains are. They can fight a margin war and actually win. They have the scale and they have the customers. This is the crisis Western companies are facing. They just don't have the economies of scale to compete, and the latest casualty is the solar market. A Swiss solar panel maker is in panic mode. They are cutting 20% of their workforce. Competition from cheap Chinese imports is burying them alive. It's not just happening to Meyer Burger. Solar companies across the West, they are facing a slow demise. If you don't control the supply chain, your inputs are at the mercy of Beijing. The further you are away from manufacturing in China, the higher your costs will be. The problem is very obvious here. The company has factories in Germany and the US, but they are operating at a loss of nearly 300 million Swiss francs. Production costs in Germany and the US are just too high. Chinese panels are undercutting their market share in Europe. In other words, Chinese solar companies are slashing their prices and Meyer Burger just can't keep up. Trying to fight a price war with China isn't possible. Companies there are willing to suffer losses for many years to grab market share and innovate ahead. Countries looking to go green, they have no choice but to buy Chinese solar panels because they offer the lowest prices. And here's what we mean. Global installations for solar panels this year are around 600 gigawatts, but China's production alone is over 1000 gigawatts. The rest of the world's capacity is only at 230. And when you control an excess amount of supply, you can slash prices down to clear inventory. Western companies, especially those in Europe, can't survive the price war. Manufacturing at the end of the day is about keeping your operating costs low. The only way to do it is to move to either a much cheaper location like Southeast Asia or partner with a Chinese company. Produce panels at the heart of the supply chain. Burgermeyer is a perfect example of this reality just playing out. They shifted some production to the US. Biden, he offered a ton of subsidies and the Swiss company took it. But they just can't make it work. The 2 gigawatt solar factory in Colorado is not financially viable and they just cancelled it. Meanwhile, their plans to expand capacity in Arizona won't happen as well. Subsidies alone aren't enough. Western countries they need to find a way to bring down their energy costs and their labor costs. And if they can't, competing with China here is quite impossible. By now, the solution should be very obvious. Instead of dishing out punishments, the West, they should be working with China instead. It's important to realize Beijing won't stop their solar push. It's more than just dominating the global market, it's more about securing their own energy supply. While China has a diversified energy mix, a lot of their power comes from oil, and over 50% of their oil consumption is imported. And this is a clear energy security risk that Beijing has. Everyone knows it, including the US. There's a clear reason why China is pushing so hard for solar, nuclear, and renewable tech is to reduce dependency on energy imports. China gets the majority of their energy imports from Russia today, but a huge amount still comes from the Middle East. This includes Saudi Arabia and Iraq, countries with a huge US presence. Let's not forget the crazy amount of US bases in the region and thousands of soldiers on the ground. China only has one single base in Djibouti. There's nothing compared to US military presence. If the unthinkable happens, Chinese supply could very well get embargoed. The US could easily close off the Strait of Hormuz and choke oil to China away. Now, I'm not saying that this will happen, but it's a clear and present danger. And that's why, no matter how much the West complains of Chinese overcapacity, Beijing won't stop their progress here. The US response to this is tariffs and even more tariffs. In May this year, President Biden he slapped China with a 50% tariff on solar imports. Firstly, this is crazy. It just invites retaliation and jacks prices higher for US consumers. How will the Biden White House reach their green goals? Solar companies in America are already collapsing. Now, just because you raise the price of Chinese imports doesn't mean the consumer will buy American. They simply won't buy any solar cells anymore. Chinese imports or US made panels will be too expensive. And this is going to hurt America's clean energy goals. Solar tech will also lag behind China over time. And this will widen the gap between Western and Chinese solar technology. The typical efficiency of a solar panel is around 15 to 20%, maybe 25% at the most. China's advancements here just blows the competition out of the water. Longhe, a Chinese solar producer, just set a new world record for efficiency. Their solar panels efficiency is at 30.1% for commercial wafers. If the tariffs continue, US consumers will be forced to buy more expensive and more inferior products. And if the economics don't make sense, companies and families, they just won't buy them. In 2025, either Trump or Harris will be in office, but there will be no difference. The trade war with China will continue, and punishing solar panels won't end. Trump, for example, isn't going to end tariffs. He's going to ramp them up because he really doesn't understand how they work.
A tariff is a tax on a foreign country. That's the way it is, whether you like it or not. A lot of people like to say, oh, it's a tax on us. No, no, no. It's a tax on a foreign country. It's a tax on a country that's ripping us off and stealing our jobs. And it's a tax that doesn't affect our country. And you could see hundreds of billions of dollars of tariffs on other countries also.
Now, if this is the mindset, tariffs are not going to stop. Whether it's on Chinese EVs or solar panels, the US is going to ramp up their punishments. But this isn't a sustainable strategy. It will push US solar tech back to the Stone Age. Once again, the manufacturing playbook is quite simple. You need efficient supply chains and a low cost of manufacturing. Unless that gets sorted out, you can throw all the tariffs you want. You can give billions or even trillions in subsidies as well, but it won't work. Your entire economy will just stagnate. But let me know what you think. Will Japan punish China's semiconductors? And can Western solar makers find a way out? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.